All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another discussion of Rings of Power. This is going to be our conversation on episode 3, Adar or Adar, whatever, whichever you like. You can
Well,
rhyme it with radar if you want. Yeah.
well, the thing is, are we going to listen to the orcs about how to pronounce things?
Oh, that's true. I don't know how good their Elvish is. It's an Elvish name. We know that much. But anyway, yeah, this is about episode 3 of Rings of Power. And as I said, and here I am with my good friend, Dr. AP Canavan. Hello, AP. How are you?
Hello, Nemesis. Are you still nemesising?
Of course I am. That's what I do. I am a professional.
Oh, you torture me, Philip. You torture
That's my job. I am a professional.
me. It is very good to see you, my friend.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm excited to talk about this episode for various reasons. Before we get started discussing the episode itself, I do have a little something I want to bring up with you, which goes back to our very first conversation about episode 1. And this is the video where we had this whole long discussion about accents, and which I think was a very interesting, and a lot of people I believe took that discussion to heart and found a value in hearing what we had to say about the accents and the stereotypes behind the accents. And you mentioned something very interesting in the course of it, was because I think we had been discussing how Tolkien's 2 Elvish languages were based on the sounds of Finnish and Welsh, respectively. And you had mentioned, I think, during the course of your what should we call it, a rant? I don't think so. It wasn't really a rant, but anyway, during the course of what you were saying, you thought it would be interesting to hear why not have elves speak with a Welsh lilt, or something like that.
Mhm.
And what I found was, as I was watching episode 3, I was listening to the actor playing Galadriel, and not during her regular dialogue, because she puts on an English accent during her regular dialogue. But whenever she would speak an Elvish word or a place name that is Tolkien, the Tolkienian, I noticed that she was giving it what I thought was a Welsh lilt. And I thought, that's interesting. And so I thought I'd look up a little bit about this actor whose name, and I should have looked this up before, but the actor's name is Morvid Clark, which is, you don't get a more Welsh name than Morvid. And I thought, oh, and then of course I looked up more, and she, it turns out, is a fluent speaker of Welsh. So what is kind of cool, I thought, is that when she says words, I'll give an example, like Numenor, which I say with an American accent. If you were to speak it with the English accent that she's putting on through most of the show, it would be Numenor, right? Or something like that. That was really bad, sorry. But if the way she says it, actually, she gives it a really Welsh lilt. In fact, she rolls the R at the end. So it's Numenor, right? Which is very un-English and very Welsh. So I thought, oh, that's cool. Actually, we do have a bit of a Welsh flavor because of this particular actor's fluency in Welsh. So I thought that was kind of neat.
And that's a lot of the actors who are playing Elvish characters. They are rolling their R's
Yeah.
in when they're saying certain things, particularly Elvish words. It's just
Yeah.
it's the switch to that high register of sort of RP for
Right.
the English.
The regular dialogue. Yeah.
And that's what you sort of go, well, why not just have it all that way? But and again, I will say, like, as much as I had a mini rant about this, the
Yeah.
framing of the Harfoots is not derogatory. Like it's more complex than that. It's just it's the imagery and the accent together, and that's the thing that it still annoys me. Like every episode that I watch, it still annoys me. But
Yeah.
it's something you just sort of go, right, fine, that's one thing that you go, right. But moving on, is it the end of the world? No. And the framing of the Harfoots has been very, very positive and interesting, and the
Yeah.
actors are doing a great job. Don't blame them. It's just as a design choice or a creative choice for the show,
Right.
I thought it's something worth pointing out because
Yeah.
in a lot of TV shows where you have like these very distinct sort of cultures you're trying to create, giving each one a cohesive accent is a very effective way to do it. It's
Right.
just when those choices lean into stereotype,
Yeah.
that's the thing that I think you need to be slightly more careful about. Now, that was my only point about it.
Yeah. Excellent. So we'll start with some general impressions of the episode, and then we can get into the three major threads that are the Harfoots, Harfeet. And then we have, of course, that includes the Meteor Man as well, which I thought there was some interesting development, let's say, along that plot line. The other major plot line concerns, of course, Galadriel and Halbrand in Numenor. And then the third one is that is in episode 3, because we don't get Elrond in episode 3. We don't get the dwarves or any of that. But we do have in episode 3 the Arondir thread, where he's been captive and all of that. So those are the 3 threads that we're going to discuss. But maybe let's start with your general impressions of the episode.
And I'll say again, I am enjoying the show. And like all of these discussions, I'm not saying the show is perfect. It has issues.
Oh, yeah.
But for me, those issues are not enough to sufficiently detract from me wanting to spend time watching the show.
Same here.
The question I always ask myself about a TV show, if it's an hour long, is it worth me sitting for an hour to watch this, or have I wasted my time? And each episode of this that I see, it has been worth that hour. So I deem it time not necessarily well spent. You know, I could be going out, getting an education, or, you know, getting some exercise or something like that.
I think you have enough education, AP.
But I've been entertained for an hour, and that's what this show is meant to do, and it is doing it. Therefore, you know, I'm enjoying it. I like it. It does have its issues, and I think I would hope that it's probably far too late for some of the stuff to be ironed out this season. But I think next season, because people have flagged it, they'll go, right, that is something we're going to tweak and streamline. And when we think of a lot of TV shows that we have come to love, that the first season has had rocky moments. The first season has had the first season has had moments where it hadn't quite hit its stride. And we all gave it a chance. And lo and behold, it developed into a great show that we really, really enjoy. So what I'm saying is I'm enjoying it. I do recognize it has flaws. I do recognize it has problems, but none of them are sufficient enough to derail my enjoyment.
Yeah.
So, that's where I'm landing on general points.
Okay, good. Yeah, one thing I would say as a general point about episode 3, I'll be curious if people want to leave comments about this. But as I was watching, I found myself thinking, I feel like a lot of the people who were complaining about the pace of episodes 1 and 2, who were not happy, they thought it was slow. The first 2 episodes was maybe a lot of setting up, or just a generally slow pace. I was wondering if they would be pleased by episode 3. The people who are still having an open mind about the show and are, you know, willing to give it a shot might have thought, okay, this is a faster pace here in episode 3. There's more action there, I think, in episode 3 than in the first 2 episodes. That was my impression as I was watching. Anyway, I just felt like it was a faster pace overall while I was watching. You had a couple fight scenes and, you know, that sort of thing, but I just also felt myself being a little more invested in the characters as they were, you know, a lot of people were talking about Galadriel, for example, being someone they don't really feel connected to because she's kind of like, you know, stoic and very tough, and that's the role she's playing, right? So, but I feel myself as she's entering into this relationship with Halbrand, that this is a way for me to start feeling more invested in her character through the relationship between her and Halbrand. So I kind of like that they put in this character who is kind of, I think, bringing out a slightly softer side of Galadriel, little maybe peaks of it. So,
well, do you remember when we were just talking about I think it was your first novel, and we were talking about how you had a scene where it was a character on their own and the character was doing things.
Yes.
And one of the things that we discussed is sometimes having a second person with the main character in a scene.
Yep.
Gives you so many more options because you can have dialogue. You can have, and that can be revelatory about the character. The character then can emote and react to things, which will show you something about the character. And the inclusion of a second person. So it's, if you think Frodo and Sam, if it had just been Frodo going to Mount Doom, that would have been a very quiet part of the film, and we'd all just be staring at him. But as soon as you add in a companion, you have a dynamic, and that adds so much to it. So instead of this sort of being focused on Galadriel on her own, we're seeing Galadriel with Halbrand, Galadriel with
Elendil.
I was see all of the Numenorean names. I get them and the lineages of the elves. I'm terrible at. I have to constantly try to remind myself. But
well, he is an elf friend, apparently, right? So,
but having dialogue, having a companion there allows for that movement, and I think that was part of what had been missing with part of Galadriel's story for some people earlier, because she met Elrond and then left, and then she was. Each time it was always focused on her almost in isolation or meeting people and moving on. We were just following her.
Yeah.
But in having a sort of companion, we get a dynamic. We get dynamism.
Even when she was with the other elves, for example, her shock troop or whatever, her up in the north in the mountains, she was really isolated from the rest of them. Because
she was in command.
Yeah.
She was in command, and therefore the separation of the officer from the troops.
Yeah.
And again, it very much focused on isolating Galadriel. So I think this is a very, very welcome development to see more interactions between characters.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that really helps is, as far as I know, this is the last major piece that needed added, because episode 1 was very much the elves and a bit about the Harfoots.
Yeah.
Episode 2 was the elves and the dwarves.
Yeah.
And episode 3 is the elves and Numenor. And throughout all of it, we've had those little moments going back to the Southlands and Arendelle. But those are the Southlands, that we recognize as that kind of shape of what Mordor is going to be.
Yep.
And we've now set up all of the sort of the major elements. We've sort of seen them. So now we know a lot of the major areas, players. And yes, each one of these is going to be developed over time. There'll be new people coming in and out. But we've got all the building blocks now.
Yeah.
Because I think that is the vast majority of them that you need for the story of basically this part of the Second Age.
Yeah. So we can expect that pace probably, I think, to continue to maybe be a little bit faster than many people experienced the first couple episodes anyway, as everything is in place.
It's not even as the pace will increase, but more because the characters, you're constantly going back then to characters that in the same way that they do with.
Yeah, it's investment.
Yeah. So it almost feels like Amazon should have released episodes 1, 2, and 3 together, because they are introducing each of the major elements.
Yeah.
But if you want a weekly TV show, if you want people to speak about it on a weekly basis, then you can understand why they don't do that. So that I think hopefully will be the end of, right, now we're just moving here to introduce this new thing.
Right. So while we're on the topic, let's talk about the Galadriel, Halbrand, and Elendil thread that takes place in Numenor. And just to start right off the bat, visually, I thought Numenor was great. I really loved the presentation of the place, the combination of sort of ancient presence, right? You've got a civilization that's really quite a lot more sophisticated than what's going on in most of the rest of Middle Earth. And these people who are separated, and the arrogance, as I predicted, is there, as well as they think of themselves as the one guy who keeps referring to Halbrand as low man, right? So that comes across really strongly in all of that. And in the court as well, where you have Muriel, who is acting as the Queen Regent, And you have the obvious where the elf friends or the people who are faithful to the old ways are in hiding or having to keep their ways secret. So I just thought that this felt like, yeah, this is Numenor. I like it. I like the way they're presenting it, from the ships to the buildings to everything else. I thought, for me, the vibe really worked well.
Yeah, and of course, Galadriel arrives and starts making waves.
Ooh, 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 ooh.
That's a Numenor joke for the people who get it.
Yeah. Not the big wave yet, but yeah.
Oh, did that just sink like a lead balloon?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It was absolutely cataclysmic, AP. I'm sorry.
Oh dear. But okay, serious face time. We're meant to be
Serious
actually
face.
discussing this, right?
Right.
So in this, let's focus first on Halbrand, because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening with Halbrand.
Yeah.
And I had mentioned I was speaking to Matt on Books the other day, and I had
Yes.
said
Yes.
there is a game that I play when I am watching, which is when you're looking at various mortal characters, you go, are they going to die or are they going to become a ring wraith? So it's
Right.
death, wraith. And that's it. You're kind of looking at it. And I know a lot of people like to speculate about, who is Sauron,
Right.
and trying to decode all of these different things. And I have to admit, when I was watching Halbrand, his easy charm,
Bit of a
that
rogue.
bit
Yeah.
of a rogue, but also extremely violent. And we see that when he breaks out in violence, it's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what struck me about that is he's almost the antithesis of the character of Aragorn, where Aragorn was reflective of the best of men. Here we have someone who, instead of having nobility and feeling fair, even though he may look foul, to do a Bagginsism, but this is someone who pretends to be fair, pretends to be charming, but it's overlying a very dark, broken, violent place. And of course, he's from the Southlands. He's
Right.
from the people
Right.
that Arendir's elves have been watching over, not because of the sins of the father, but because of who they still are.
Mm.
And remember, in the village, they were talking about wait until our king comes back. And we find out in this episode that that mark that he is carrying is the mark of the king. And he says, I got it from a dead man.
Yeah.
So
Right.
did,
Yeah.
did he loot a body? Or, yeah, his dad died and he lifted it off his dad, who was the king.
Mm.
That could be an explanation. I don't know. But the darkness inherent in that, I find really, really interesting, because that is the area that is being corrupted. That is the area where we can see the orcs tunneling through. And we'll get to that with the Arendir storyline.
Right.
But in terms of sort of progression, I'm thinking, here's this person, a human, who is going to be a king and maybe will rally troops, but will betray men and elves to side with Morgoth again. That this could be the fall of that character, rather than
He could
Halbrand
become
going,
one of the Nazgul. You're predicting it right now. Is that your prediction?
yeah, yeah, that's totally, yeah. But I
Right.
think he is, if he becomes the king of the men in the south,
Yeah.
this is the kind of person that Sauron would ultimately be trying to suborn.
Yeah.
And we've seen that darkness in him.
Got something for you, buddy. Yeah.
And because of that, that's why I was playing that game. So he, I think, will survive, just lose a bit of weight.
But I also like how he's being presented not as just evil. He actually is a sympathetic character. He's actually trying to run away. Maybe it's run away from responsibility, but maybe he's also trying to run away because he doesn't want to be evil. And so he wants to lead a simple, easy life somewhere nice, like Numenor, where maybe he could be a blacksmith or something. But yeah, he seems to me to be not an evil person, just somebody who's very conflicted. And I like that. I like the complexity of his character, that he's likable, actually. He's a lovable rogue. But you can see, as you say, there is that part of him where you think, if this guy were tempted with a ring that could give him a ton of power and long life, I kind of think he probably would accept that. So I think maybe that's an interesting, and I was thinking along similar lines. So yeah, we shall see, I guess. But yeah.
And I think it's interesting that we don't think of in the binary of good or evil, because I think a lot of people mistakenly assign that to Tolkien. Yes, there's clearly the side of good. The side of good is not in doubt, and the side of evil is not in doubt.
Right.
But a lot of the characters in Tolkien's work straddle that line, because it is about that choice between, are you going to do the right thing or are you going to do the wrong thing?
Like Gollum Smeagol, right? I mean, yeah.
And everything that Halbrand has seemed to do has been very much self-serving.
Yeah.
That yes, Galadriel gets her behind saved by him in the throne room because Halbrand diffuses the situation.
And in the ocean, yeah.
And in the ocean. But he diffuses the situation in the throne room. But that's to stop him going down with her. That she wasn't going to take him down, so he needed to rescue both of them. That there's a self-serving motive. He's sitting there, clearly a pickpocket and a thief. Not exactly the sign of a good, upright, and upstanding citizen.
Right.
So I'm finding him interesting, and I find the witty, well, I wouldn't call it witty repartee, the repartee between them, the dynamic between Galadriel and him, where from her perspective, he is a traitor.
Yeah, but there's a bond forming there. There's a real bond forming between them, as he did save her life in the ocean. I mean, he could have just cut the rope and said, sorry,
but it's that, and that's the point I just wanted to bring up. She sees him as a traitor because of the sins of the great grandfather.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to see those little sort of chinks in her armor now breaking down, because she realizes, no, he's not them.
Yeah.
She's been so focused and so separated from the world. She's been in her own world so focused that she's lost sight of these things. And this trip to Numenor, I think, is so important for Galadriel's character. Because Elendil gets through to her. She comes into Numenor and goes, oh yeah, I remember when this was all trees, essentially. She has that old person's view of things.
Yeah.
And she's looking around and go, and then they stop letting elves come here. And then you can almost see her like thinking about how long ago that was and trying to work it out and go, huh. And so she is getting her worldview shaken.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important lesson for her.
Very much so. Yeah, she's being humanized and by her interactions with both of these characters, with Halbrand and with Elendil. And I like the Elendil thread so far. I really do. I like how they're not presenting Elendil like you read him in the Silmarillion. He's basically just a very noble guy who refuses to go along with the corrupt stuff that's going on in Numenor. They're really giving us a more fleshed out, complex person who is conflicted too, because he knows that sticking out as adhering to the old, being an elf friend, is going to get you in trouble, right? So he is very secretive about his real. That scene, which I love, where he's talking with Galadriel when she's escaped from her room and her minders, and he's kind of like, standing back there and saying, you'd be better off with the other ship there, not the skiff. And that's a great scene because she threatens him with her dagger, and he's pretty cool about it. And when he speaks Elvish to her, suddenly there's an understanding. Oh, okay, there's more to you than I thought, buddy. You speak Elvish, and why would that be in a place where they don't like elves anymore? So the relationship there is good, and Elendil's, they're bringing it out in a way that you can feel the danger here in Numenor to people of his persuasion. Like his one son, we haven't met yet, Anarion. It seems clear that he is working in some secretive way against the powers that be, and I don't know exactly what that is yet, but we shall see. And his two children, who seem very, bright and promising. He's trying to make it so they can succeed in this compromised world, but they're probably perceiving more swiftly than he is that you can't live in a compromised way here, so.
Well, just that scene where Elendil confronts her about the boat.
Yeah.
And he mentions that, you can see it on the sculptures. The one thing because he looks back, points basically at the thing he's standing beside. And I went, oh, you're going to show no, you're not going to show if it has I can't. Do you want me to pause and try and zoom in? If they had just sort of let the camera linger on it and zoom in a little bit, or for him to move back the ivy that had grown over it to show the Elvish script running down the side.
Yeah.
It just would have been nice. So I think sometimes there are little moments like that that are missing from the storytelling, that they are missing these obvious beats that should be there. But I really like that, because if you think of that scene when Galadriel when they go into the court.
Yes.
And you go, oh, Galadriel should be, a supplicant. But remember, Galadriel is one of the most powerful, oldest, most well-respected elves who has ever lived.
Yeah.
And the queen regent imperiously goes, name thyself.
Yeah.
And so Galadriel gives her formal titles. And instead of the queen then being respectful, the queen regent is scornful.
Yes. In front of the court. Yes.
In front of everyone.
Yeah.
So Galadriel has just had this jumped up mortal disrespect her title, and her high king.
Yeah.
And you go, right. That's probably not a good idea. So you can see that Galadriel's anger is rising. It's getting the better of her. She's not acting in a wise way, because she's still too focused, too driven, too
rash. Yeah.
Prideful.
Pride. There's the pride theme. Yeah.
And we see in the Queen Regent's response that, again, it is all about pride, because they were given the land of, or the island of Numenor by the Valar. They were given it. And we were given nothing. We earned it.
But how much of that on Muriel's part is an act? Because there are several indications that Muriel is putting on a show in order to not get in trouble, because apparently it's her father who has been dethroned and essentially imprisoned, because he, like Elendil's family, was faithful to the elves and to the older ways. And so it seems to me that because she gives the sword to Elendil and has that whole conversation with him about the meaning of his name, she's feeling him out, right? Are you going to be somebody I can trust here? And so finally, when she hands him the sword, says, I got a mission for you. It seems to me that, and at the very end too, where she comes up into the tower and meets presumably her father and says, it's time, the elf has arrived. I feel like she's putting on a show in order to, a facade that we're meant to see her as not buying into what's happened in Numenor, which is the corruption of their society, the arrogance that drives them to a place where they feel like they can defy the gods,
And it is very ambiguous. She gives Elendil the sword, and you go, I have a mission for you. You go, is he going to try and kill Galadriel? Because that's probably not going to work out well.
No.
But we then, that's where we get the hint that, oh, actually, maybe the Queen Regent isn't. So why then in the courtroom was she doing that? And who is standing next to her? Who is the person who butts in and is talking and addressing?
Power. Yeah.
And it's the power of the populist demagogue. Is it Al-Farazon?
Yeah, Ar-Pharazôn, I think is. Yeah.
Again, apologies for the mispronunciation of anything. Yeah. I'm bad at it. And again, people who understand the lore know who he is. And they've changed things around a little bit, but he is.
Yeah.
But he is that anti-elf, prideful, arrogant person. And there's a whole story there that hopefully we'll be getting into. But he doesn't represent the best of Numenor. And again, where is Elendil from? He's from the west,
Right.
the side closest to Valinor.
Yeah.
And there are all of these sort of little hints in it.
Where there's still elf friends, the puppet show where Galadriel is a hero, right? That you see going on there. Lots of hints that they differ from the rest of the island. Yeah.
So I thought that was all very, very nice. But then in terms of even some of the practicality stuff that they snuck in, the fact that when they are on the ships, they have the leather armor.
So you don't
But
say
when you see the guards in court, they're wearing the heavy metal,
Yeah.
the metal plate. And of course, oh, but why wouldn't they wear plate on a ship? It's like, because if you fell over, you'd sink
Right.
and drown.
Yeah.
And it's even just, and I think the costuming, the variety of costumes that they have in the city, that there's a blaze of color, a blaze of styles, and yet they all seem linked. They seem culturally appropriate to create a sense of the place.
Yeah.
I thought that was really wonderfully done. And again, in this episode, we have another Forge reference. So in the very first episode, there was the anvil that Galadriel found. In the next one, obviously, we get the dwarves and what they're going on about, and Celebrimbor and his plans for a forge.
Yep.
And then here we have an entire, I want to work in your forge. I will make metal for you and an anchor. And so each episode has had this in it. And you go, that's actually a nice motif that is
Rings
now
of Power. What are we going to be making? Yeah. And I want it in the spring, AP. Oh, wait. I wasn't supposed to say that line. Sorry. Yeah.
And again, there are those occasional moments where I go, it's not the choice I would have made. Like the Galadriel's joy at being told that they're going to go for a ride. And you go, that was lovely. Then the slow motion thing with the horse. It was a choice.
It didn't work for me either. The smile was a little weird. It was like,
but
yeah,
it was a choice. And what I'll say about this, rather than commenting on that specific aspect, but it was more thinking about it. This is the first time that she has been free to do this. Because up until now, if you think, she's been on a centuries-long hunt of sailing and climbing and walking and killing orcs and killing trolls.
Yeah.
And it's just been day after day for centuries. And then she gets called back.
Yeah.
But she gets called back to Lindon. She then gets sent to Valinor, then jumps in the sea to get away from it, ends up on a shipwreck. And now this is her first moment to indulge.
Yeah, yeah.
And
that
joy,
it's a sign of her character. That it's good. It's good they're introducing it. Yeah.
And so I think that joy added to this dynamic now of having people for her to interact with is good. Reminding her of who she used to be.
Yeah.
I think is very important. And added to that is that moment in the Tower of Lore where she goes, "You didn't tell me Elros made this."
Yeah, yeah.
And she looks up to see the tapestry of Elros, whom she knew, and his brother Elrond, who she still knows.
Yeah, I actually knew Elrond a little bit better, as she says. Yeah, that's a great line. So good. Anything else on Numenor, or shall we wave goodbye to Numenor?
Well, the one last thing about that is, again, it emphasized this trying to come to terms with the difference between sort of elf time and mortal time.
Yeah, yeah.
And also, like, through all of this, we again see pride, we see ambition, that these are all very strongly being signaled as aspects that the characters and societies are exhibiting. And I think that is very, very important for the entirety of the Second Age. That with power can come this pride, and pride goeth before a fall.
Yep.
And I think that is so absolutely central to what we see, that aspect, paying attention to when a character is actually humble, or a character is wise rather than being prideful. And that's what we see in Elendil.
Yeah, good. All right, well, with that, then it is time to wave goodbye to Numenor.
See you later.
See you later. Nice, I like it. Let us then proceed to Middle Earth, where poor Arondir is not having such a great time at the moment. Some interesting developments there, where the show's episode, it is called Adar. I'm sorry, I can't remember how they pronounce it. Adar. So this figure that the orcs are basically, it's a cult-like thing. The orcs are almost like worshiping this Adar figure, who seems to be, from the blurry little picture we get of him at the end. I'm saying him. I think it's a him. Not an orc. So I think there's probably plenty of space for conjecture. We'll find out what Adar is, but I'm sure some people are wondering, is this Sauron, or is this the Witch King, or is this who is this Adar, and why is it an elf name? That seems to be like, there's that moment in the show when Arondir is there and they're like telling him, oh yeah, it's Adar, and he's like, Adar, that's an elf name. So I mean, we're supposed to notice that, right? So
yeah, because like Philip is a hobbit name.
Ooh, okay. I see that.
I am sorry, my friend.
You could call me Pip then, I guess, right?
But this was fun because obviously we saw Arondir get dragged into the tree roots very, very suddenly. So now we find out what happened to him. We find out why the Watch commander and the rest of that company hadn't turned up anywhere. And they've all been captured.
Right.
And this was this brilliant look at the orcs. So we'd had one orc in the previous episode. Now we get a bunch of orcs.
Yep.
One of the things that they did that I really, really liked was, well, there are two things actually I want to talk about here.
Okay.
And the first is the orcs not wanting to be out in sunlight. That the light of the sun, because it's meant to be, think of it in terms of holy light, and they are unholy creatures, that it burns them, that they don't like it. And that's very, very true to Tolkien. And the fact that they paid attention to that is nice. I think when they are trying to articulate Tolkien's vision, particularly in a storyline that we know that they are inventing to try and give us a fuller picture of this development.
Yeah,
I think it's nice to recognize these things. So I thought the design of the orcs, they were menacing, they were threatening. They looked primitive and barbaric and frightening in a way that the Jackson orcs felt a bit more industrial.
Interesting. Yeah. There was a slightly, I agree that there's a slightly stronger horror aspect to these orcs in Rings of Power. The one thing I will say that did not work for me in this section was the warg, which reminded me a lot of the giant poodle in the Incredible Hulk movie. Do you remember that Hulk movie where one of these dogs turn into Hulk dogs and one of them is a poodle? The warg, it looked like a poodle with it just did not work for me. I'm sorry.
I think it was the eyes being big bug eyes.
Maybe, but I mean, that was not, the warg was the one thing in the show that made me think, oh no. But anyway.
Yeah, but you know, it was a mangy warg and not one of the cool wargs. We'll get the cool wargs later. That was the one that the orcs had been looking after.
And it looked like a runt warg, yeah.
Yeah. But the second thing that I really liked about that sequence was how when you got that view slightly above the trench line, you saw that the trench actually went all the way off into the distance.
Yeah.
But the piles of sulfur and the yellow smoke, the other smoke as well, it was so reminiscent, eerily reminiscent of some of the stuff about World War One and the trenches of World War One.
Yeah.
And while no one is suggesting that what Tolkien wrote was allegory, he certainly wrote with those experiences in mind.
Yeah.
And they informed his vision. And I think that was something that was like extremely evocative on the screen to understand that devastation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. And as much as if you overthink it, you could poke holes in it, but I love the idea of the tree being the almost a symbol of what the elves get into the fight with the orcs with. It happens over the tree, which is, of course, it's a symbol of life, and the elves are very much attuned to trees and life and that sort of thing. So it's a sacrilege for them to cut down this ancient tree. It physically hurts them.
Well, to cut it down for no reason
Yeah.
is a sacrilege.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the orcs are up to no good. Obviously, they seem to be after something, and we know because of the other plot line, or at least we suspect, some of us suspect, that what they might be after is that little sword that seems to grow with the boy Theo's blood, right? That this seems to be an important object that somehow he has gotten his hands on. And is that the object that these orcs are tunneling for? Other than the fact that they seem to be taking over so they can make Mordor happen, they're after something. It seems like there's an objective here, and it might be that sword. But yeah.
And so I liked almost all of the visual stuff about that. Well, okay, the Warcraft.
Yeah.
The day I get annoyed about CGI really being bad in a TV show,
Yeah.
it was fine. It did what it needed to do.
Just one of my quibbles. Just one of my little quibbles. Yeah.
But the slow motion using the chains as weapons.
Yeah, that was good.
Really fancy elf footwork and all of that sort of action. I think we actually get one of the moments here, and it's a choice, obviously, of trying to limit or trying to reduce the age range, which is obviously when the elf gets his throat cut.
Yeah.
So it'd be that side. And they don't have like the blood goes like that, and they don't have his head falling off or anything.
Yeah, you see it slowly form. Yeah.
They try to make it very, very minimal because they don't want it to be gory. I think they're aiming closer to sort of a family accessible show than like a very adult show. It seems more trying to age it down a bit, which I think a lot of people appreciate, that there's not blood and guts and gore spraying everywhere on the screen. But again, other people might go, but that makes it look unrealistic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Fluffy does eat a couple elves and gets into their guts and everything.
Yeah, but you don't have that close up look.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how that. I mean, I haven't seen that in real life, so I don't know how that would actually. Was that a more accurate? Is he gets this really sharp blade that just goes, and is that actually a more accurate portrayal than splatter all over the place? I don't know.
Well, no, because you would need to hit an artery.
An artery. Would you think it would be bursting? Yeah.
But
anyway,
again,
yeah.
It's whether or not you want to see like really gritty realism, and I don't think this is the show for really gritty realism.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're right. Yeah.
But that was an elf that we knew, even if we didn't know his name. Then his name, then the Watch Commander, and like his death was actually again very reminiscent of going over the top and running into enemy fire.
Yeah,
I couldn't help but get those sorts of vibes, I believe is the word.
Yeah, good word. Yeah, yeah. No, that was an impactful death, I felt, because he's supposed to be in charge. He's strong. He's supposed to be, and poor Arondir is like sacrificed to allow him to run away. And he's just kind of peeking over, and he sees him, and you see him sort of just standing there, and then you realize, oh no, he's been shot. And it's like hope has been snatched away in that moment, and that something even worse is about to happen. Yes, indeed, they're going to take poor Arondir to see a personal appointment with Adar, which doesn't sound like it's going to be fun. Yeah. So
I mean, because that storyline about the Southlands, that's clearly our counterpoint to the other storylines, which are all on the sort of the side of allies, and then this is the side where bad things are happening. So I really like that. I like that we're getting introduced to the Southlands in that way. We're seeing the occupation. A lot of that warlike language really does apply.
Yeah.
But that brings us on to the Harfeet.
Yes, the Harfoots, whatever. Yes. I mean, I continue to really enjoy in spite of our and I will say our because it did
Yeah.
make me wince too. Our wish that they had chosen perhaps a slightly different accent for them, but I still think that the actors are doing a wonderful job, and I love these people very much. I think that the dynamic between Poppy and Nori especially is so endearing. But in general, I just love them all. I think it's a fun aspect of the show, and I'm glad it's there because it does introduce, as you and I have observed many times about some of our favorite reads, to have this level of comedy amidst much more high and serious and tragic themes is really helpful. So to have these moments where I can smile at the shenanigans is kind of fun. So I like that. I also like what they seem to be doing with the Meteor Man, who's now before I was more actually, to be honest with you, I was leaning more toward a sinister interpretation of his character. But after this episode, I've been pushed over to a more, oh, I think he's going to be a good guy. I think he's going to be nice. The thing about him is he doesn't have control. If he's, as we suspect, an ethereal being, whether he's Gandalf or one of the other Istari or whatever, he doesn't have control yet. He's been put in the flesh, and he doesn't know how this body operates yet. He doesn't know how to rein in his power. So when he tried to use the fireflies to arrange them into the constellation, he ended up killing them, and that was an overuse of his power. Or when he gets near fire, it tends to roar up, and so, which again pushes me more toward a Gandalf interpretation because of the fire. But who knows? Who knows? I'm having fun thinking about it. But I do think that with him ending up with that single word, which he hears them, Nori say first, he's my friend. And then later, when they're in their predicament and they've been essentially not quite, exiled, but they've been not quite condemned, but just the next thing to it, he shows up and he just says the single word friend. And it reminded me so much of the scene in front of Moria, where what's the word in Elvish for friend?
Speak, friend, and enter.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, okay, are they giving me hints here that this is Gandalf, maybe? But I found myself thinking, okay, this is going to be a benign character. The scary elements are because he's an ethereal being and there's a lot of power inside the flesh, and he doesn't know what to do with it yet. So I don't know. What do you thought about the whole Harfeet and Meteor Man part?
Much like Diza and Jern in the previous episode, I thought that the relationship between Poppy and Nori is brilliant.
Yeah,
absolutely fantastic, and they are that light-hearted antidote to these grand, sort of slightly cold stories like of the power plays of princes, and then these are the people who are at ground level and living out their lives. These are the innocents who are going to be affected by this. And of course, they're on their migratory route back over the mountains to the west. So this is, I think, necessary to balance out. It gives an added element of, despite the fact that they are not human, humanity and warmth to the story.
That's what the hobbits do in general in Tolkien's books,
And this was what we saw with Halbrand and getting Elendil's interactions with his children. Again, it's humanizing the story, and because of that, I think that actually makes us want to invest more. When we think of all of these grand mythic stories of these heroes who are of powers beyond knowing, that they're bigger, larger than life, more powerful than anything, they do all these grand adventures. They're not really knowable. They're not really identifiable. They're not really relatable. It's very hard to latch onto those things. You go, oh yeah, that was cool when they, punched that meteor out of the sky. But you don't have that same investment. But as soon as you bring in that human aspect where you understand relationships, you start identifying with the story more. And I think that is a key aspect. And I'm hoping it develops further. Yeah. Particularly as they are not playing the Harfoots simply as comic relief, although there is a strong element of that.
Yeah,
the darkness and poignancy associated with if you fall behind the caravan.
And the roll call, that is a good scene. Yeah.
And, this sense of community. Oh, we're all in this together. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
Well, if you break the rules, you get decaravanned and you're out and you can die on your own.
According to Malva. Yeah.
That's a brutal society. And you go, well, hang on a sec. They survive by hiding. They survive on these migrations.
Yeah.
That Sadok has listed out, that when you see the men and the wolves, that's the part of the year that they're in, because the hunters had appeared with the antlers on their back. He was reading along that. And then the next thing along from that were wolves. And you go, right, so it's now time to, it was a calendar.
Yes.
So this signals why they have to now start migrating.
Yeah.
And they need to stick together for safety.
Right.
But you cannot sacrifice everyone for the sake of one or two.
That's
and
right.
So it is a perilous world for them. And for all that they've been funny and silly, we suddenly realize that, yes, they are living in this real world, and it is actually quite dangerous for them. And there are perils and losses.
Yep.
And that, it surprised me. The poignancy of it.
Mm-hmm.
And Poppy obviously remembering her entire family who got killed.
Yeah, because she's alone. Yeah.
And her own little cart that she's on her own. She's got
her own cart. Yeah. Yeah.
That suddenly that gives you a depth of understanding of these characters. And I thought that was beautifully done.
Yeah.
And then that darkness of you're going to go at the back. Because if you go at the front, like you'd planned, you'd have slowed everyone down.
Right. Yeah, Sadok tries to mitigate the punishment, which is over Nori's befriending the whoever that is.
The giant.
The giant. He tries to mitigate it, and he also see him he knows on some level that this is a condemnation. This is a death sentence. And he kind of turns away from it. He's like, yep, the back, yep. And then he just sort of, you can feel that. Like he's tried as best as he could to mitigate it. He also has, Nori's father has the broken ankle. So there are twisted ankle, but there are a couple factors that are, against them at that moment. And he's making this very life and death decision, which he tries to, turn away from immediately. And there is a poignancy, but that mixture of humor along with the serious is something that in this thread they do really well, even with the Meteor Man. Like when he shows up, like I said, he doesn't have control over his body yet. So he's trying to read the man. He's like, oh yes, these are the stars. And he's all excited, but he gets excited and the fire flames up. And in response to his excitement, I guess. And then he gets all tangled up in the nets and everything. And it's a comic moment where he just sort of tears it and finally his head pops out. Which again makes me think, I don't think this is Sauron. I don't think this is a horrible, evil character. They wouldn't be playing this comedy here if it were.
It was also slightly reminiscent of Gandalf in Bag End smacking his head off.
Yeah. So again, I think it's another Gandalf nod,
Which, if I have to be perfectly honest, I am not a fan of that comment. I went, I get that it's meant to be funny. I didn't laugh at that bit. That bit didn't make me laugh.
I smiled.
Nori trying to steal the star map
to the left,
and Poppy doing the directions. That I laughed at. That was actually very, very clever and very well done, and I found it highly entertaining.
Yeah.
So I think with Galadriel now being involved in Numenor, with Elendil and the introduction of Isildur, and hopefully the introduction of the Faithful, that we get that aspect of the society. We're going to have Celebrimbor and Elrond and the dwarves, that aspect.
Yes.
We have the Southlands, and clearly we're going to get more updates on what's going on in the Southlands. Suddenly we have all of these pieces in motion.
Yep.
We know where we are on the map. We can see where things are going to go and where there's going to be communication and movement. Key players have been identified. And to me, this is now building a very solid foundation for a very interesting story arc. So I'm excited to see where they go from here.
Likewise, my friend. So this has been a great discussion. I've enjoyed it very much, and I am also excited to see where it goes. Episode 4 is going to be an interesting one, I think, to see some of these elements continue to converge. So wonderful. Well, my thanks to you and to all the listeners out there and everybody. Until next time.